That day, the heat was brutal, like the sky itself was on fire. A 12-year-old boy carried his injured little sister to the hospital, barefoot, his clothes caked in dust. But no one helped. They looked, then turned away. Some said, "You need an adult. You need money." Others shook their heads, dismissing him as just another dirty, homeless kid. Until one man quietly stepped forward, not asking questions, not waiting for permission. He simply said, "I'll take responsibility." And from that moment on, the lives of those two children began to change forever. But before that day, they lived like shadows. The apartment was small and smelled of boiled cabbage and cigarette smoke, the kind of place where sound carried too well and silence weighed heavy, pressing against the walls like humidity. Caleb Moore, 12 years old and taller than most boys his age, stood at the sink, rinsing out a plastic cup with a crack down the side. His little sister Lena, just 3, sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor with a mismatched doll in her lap and applesauce on her chin. From the hallway came the low hum of a television someone had left on too loud. Somewhere above, a toilet flushed. But in their unit, the stillness was different, tight, like breath held too long. Caleb glanced at the clock. 6:47 p.m. His mother should have been home an hour ago. He turned to Lena and smiled. "You hungry again, bug?" She nodded, not looking up. He knew she wasn't. Not really. She just wanted the comfort of being cared for. He reached for the last banana and peeled it slowly, dividing it into 2 parts. "Half for me, half for you. Fair deal." Before she could answer, the front door creaked open. Caleb stiffened. Stephanie Moore walked in first, her eyeliner smudged, her uniform wrinkled, and her purse slung crooked over her shoulder. Behind her came Dale, in a button-up shirt he never tucked in, with that kind of smirk that made Caleb want to hide things, like the drawing Lena taped to the wall, like his own feelings. "You couldn't even clean the damn floor." Dale's voice sliced through the kitchen before Caleb could speak. Stephanie turned toward him, tired. "Dale, not now." "No," Dale cut in, stepping further into the room. "I've been busting my ass all day too. Kid can't even wipe applesauce off the ground." Caleb pulled Lena into his side, protective and quiet. "It's fine," Stephanie muttered, rubbing her forehead. "They're kids." "No," Dale snapped, voice tightening. "He's old enough to pull his weight. You keep babying him and he'll end up soft." Caleb didn't look up. He knew the rules. Eye contact was invitation. Talking back was war. He felt Lena's fingers wrap around his. She always knew when to get quiet. "You know," Dale said, looking right at him now, "maybe if your real dad had stuck around, you'd have some idea how to be a man." The words burned. Caleb didn't cry. Not here. Not in front of him. Stephanie shifted, almost said something, but didn't. Dale snorted and walked off toward the fridge. "Nothing in this dump to eat anyway." Caleb exhaled, slow and quiet, then looked down at Lena. She blinked up at him, wide-eyed, doll forgotten. He crouched and whispered in her ear, "It's okay, bug. I've got us." She nodded, small and solemn. A secret pact. That night, as Dale's snores echoed from the bedroom and their mother sat on the couch staring into nothing, Caleb covered Lena with the only clean blanket and curled up beside her on the floor, his shoulder against hers, his palm against her back, listening to her breathe. The moonlight came through the blinds in slivers. In that stillness, he made a promise he wouldn't speak aloud, that whatever happened, she'd never be alone in this house. Not in the dark. Not while he was still breathing. And even if no one ever said it to him, he would be her safety, even if the world never gave it back. The heat that day didn't hum. It hissed. Windows groaned under the weight of it. The air inside the apartment clung to skin like wet fabric. Caleb stood by the sink, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, watching the slow drip of the faucet, like it might answer him. Lena was sprawled out on the faded carpet in the living room, humming to herself as she pushed a crayon back and forth across the same spot of paper. "Don't sing so loud, Bug," Caleb called. "Dale's asleep." She didn't answer, just switched to whispering. It was their quiet kind of rhythm, the kind that comes when the world outside your window doesn't feel safe to look at. Caleb was 12, but his shoulders ached like someone twice his age, from holding too much, from never knowing when it might all fall apart. The front door opened harder than usual. Stephanie stumbled in first, sweat at her collarbone, hair pinned back in a clip that no longer held much. Her purse hung like a weight. And Dale followed, shirt half-buttoned, sunglasses still on indoors. That look on his face, the one that made Caleb's stomach knot. "Get her off the floor," Dale muttered, gesturing toward Lena. "She's drawing," Stephanie said gently. "In my living room?" Caleb moved quickly, picking Lena up, though she protested softly. "We were being quiet," he offered. Dale's mouth twitched. Always an excuse. He grabbed a beer from the fridge, didn't look at either of them. Stephanie dropped her purse. "Let's not today, okay?" "Let's not what?" he asked. "Let's not pretend your kids run this place. Let's not keep acting like I'm not the only damn adult around here with a job that matters." Stephanie's mouth opened, but nothing came out. That night, the air didn't cool. The heat just settled deeper, as if it too had decided not to leave. Dale stayed up watching TV, loud, slurring at commercials. Caleb took Lena to their room early, tried to keep her quiet, though she wanted to dance. She spun, little hands raised, laughing at nothing and everything. "Shh," he whispered again. "You'll wake him." But she didn't hear, or she didn't care, or maybe at 3 years old, you still think love is louder than fear. Then, too quick for him to stop it, the door burst open. Dale stood in the frame, shoulders like a wall. "I told you to keep her quiet," he growled. "She was just playing," Caleb said, moving toward Lena. But Dale reached her first. He shoved her, hard. She tumbled back, her small frame hitting the wooden edge of the coffee table with a dull, thick thud, the sound of something that shouldn't bend that way. Time collapsed. Caleb blinked, and suddenly the room wasn't a room. It was fire. It was blood and silence, and breath he couldn't find. Lena lay crumpled, not crying, not moving. "She'll be fine," Dale muttered, stepping back. Caleb dropped to the floor. "Lena." He shook her shoulder gently. Her eyes fluttered, but didn't open. "She needs a doctor," he cried. Dale scoffed. "You need to grow up. That little brat's always underfoot. Maybe now she'll learn to listen." "You hurt her." She ran into the table. "She's clumsy. Kids do dumb things." "You shoved her." Dale leaned in. "And you're going to keep your mouth shut. You say anything, and they'll split you two up. You think some foster home's going to keep you together? You think they'll let a 12-year-old boy raise a toddler? You'll lose her." Caleb felt the floor tilt under him. "She's all I've got," he said. "And you're nothing without me," Dale snapped. "Your mum needs me. You need to stop getting in the way." Caleb stared at him, and for the first time, he didn't look away. "She's not breathing right," he whispered. Dale turned, already cracking open another beer. That's when Caleb stood. He walked to Lena, wrapped her in the blanket from the couch, soft fleece, worn thin from too many washes, and lifted her carefully into his arms. Her head rested against his chest, breath shallow, skin hot. He didn't put on shoes, didn't bring a phone. He just left, out the door, down the steps, into the open mouth of summer. No one stopped him. The world, as always, looked the other way. He walked 4 blocks before his arms began to tremble. Lena felt heavier with each step. The sun blistered the back of his neck. Cars passed without slowing. He didn't cry. He couldn't afford to. At a gas station, he stepped inside to ask for help. The cashier, a teen with a bored stare, looked them over and said, "No phone. Store policy." Caleb swallowed. "She's 3. She hit her head. Please." The boy shrugged. "Try the hospital." So he walked again. Somewhere near the edge of the city, he passed a sign that read, "In a world full of noise, be someone's quiet place." He whispered stories into Lena's ear, about pancakes that looked like stars, about their mother when she used to sing in the kitchen, about a backyard they didn't have, but might someday. At a street corner, an old woman with a walker spotted him and called out, "Sweetheart? You need help?" He turned, hesitant. She took one look at Lena and waved him over. "Come, sit. Let me see." He sat on her porch. She touched Lena's forehead, frowned. "I can't drive," she said, "but I can give you $20. The clinic's 10 minutes from here if you run." Caleb looked up, startled. She smiled softly. "I've had children too, and grandchildren. I know what desperation looks like when it wears a brave face." He nodded. "Thank you." "You're doing right by her," the woman said. And with Lena pressed against him, and the world finally noticing they existed, Caleb ran. Not away from something, but toward it, toward help, toward healing, toward the kind of silence that doesn't wound, but listens. The heat rose off the pavement like it had something to say. It shimmered in the distance, turning cars into mirages and stop signs into ghosts. Caleb Moore's arms trembled from the weight of his little sister, but he didn't shift her. Lena lay heavy and warm against his chest, her breath shallow, her curls matted with sweat. She hadn't made a sound in 20 minutes, not since the fall. The sun was high and white, the kind of heat that made air feel like punishment. He was 12 years old and barefoot. The sidewalk beneath him, scorched. With every step, it burned more. But he didn't stop. He passed a man on a bicycle who slowed down just enough to look, then pedaled faster, head turned away. A woman walked her dog on the other side of the street. She glanced over, her lips parting like she might ask something, but she didn't. She turned up the volume on her phone and kept walking. Caleb didn't blame them. People had lives, schedules, reasons. Still, it stung. "I got you, Bug," he whispered to Lena, whose head lolled gently against his collarbone. "I got you no matter what." The words sounded like something his mother used to say, back when things weren't quite so broken. He turned onto Belmont Avenue. It was 3 long blocks to the nearest clinic. He'd counted them once when Mom had needed antibiotics. 3 blocks. No shade. 1 bus stop. He remembered sitting there, his legs too short to dangle, watching other kids with their dads buy ice cream across the street. Now, no one was handing out popsicles, just the sun, merciless and wide. His feet had begun to blister. He tried walking on the grass patches beside the road, but even those were dried to needles. Lena whimpered once, then fell quiet again. The silence scared him more than anything. He passed a strip mall. The sign for a check-cashing place blinked "Open" in red neon, even though the door was locked. A man behind the counter looked up and stared as Caleb tried to open the door. He didn't move to help. Caleb pressed his forehead against the glass for a moment, just to feel something cool. Then he kept going. His arms had gone numb, but he didn't stop. Each breath felt like it scraped against his ribs. Sweat ran down his spine in steady rivulets. He passed a convenience store and stepped inside. The blast of air conditioning made him gasp. The clerk, a young man with shaggy hair and a face that looked like it hadn't slept in days, barely looked up. "We don't allow loitering." "I'm not loitering," Caleb said, too weak to sound angry. "She's hurt." The clerk blinked. "You need an ambulance?" Caleb shook his head. "No phone." "Can I just use yours for a second?" The man looked him over. "Can't. Manager'll dock me." Caleb stood there a beat longer, holding Lena like she might float away if he didn't. Then he turned and left. Behind him, the automatic doors whispered closed. Outside again, the heat hit like a slap. He turned down the next street, Ashby. The clinic wasn't far now, maybe 6 more minutes, 7, tops. "You remember that duck pond we saw in the book?" he whispered to Lena. "We'll go someday. I'll let you throw breadcrumbs." No answer. A memory drifted up from somewhere old. Their mother singing "You Are My Sunshine" in the kitchen. She used to spin Lena in circles until the baby shrieked with laughter. Back when her eyes weren't always ringed with exhaustion. Back when Caleb still believed grown-ups fixed things. He crossed in front of a church. The steps were wide and white, dappled with bird droppings and heat. A sign outside read, "Kindness is the language the deaf can hear, and the blind can see." He stopped. He didn't plan to. His knees buckled. He sank to the concrete steps, clutching Lena tighter, his chest heaving. Tears blurred the sign. His throat felt thick with dust and grief and rage he didn't know what to do with. A door creaked. A voice, gravelly, old, gentle. "Son." He looked up. A woman stood in the doorway, maybe late 60s, maybe older. Her hair was pulled into a low bun, her dress pale blue. She held a Bible in one hand and a set of keys in the other. Her eyes narrowed against the light. "Is she breathing?" she asked. He nodded. "Barely." "Come," she said, "quickly." He followed her inside. The foyer smelled of wood polish and lemons. She led him to a couch just beyond the sanctuary and motioned for him to lay Lena down. Then she disappeared and returned with a damp cloth and a bottle of water. "You have family nearby?" she asked. He shook his head. "No one that can help." She pressed the cloth to Lena's forehead. "What's your name?" "Caleb." "And hers?" "Lena. She's 3. The woman nodded like she already knew them. "I'll call the clinic," she said. "They're just down the street. I'll have someone meet you out front." She hit her head, Caleb whispered. "It's bad." "I know," the woman said. Caleb looked down at his feet, blistered, red, raw. "She didn't do anything wrong. I believe you." The words cracked something open in him. "I didn't know what else to do," he said. "I just walked." She sat beside him. "Sometimes walking is the bravest thing." He closed his eyes. The quiet around them wasn't heavy. It was soft. "People kept looking away," he said after a while. "Sometimes looking means feeling, and some folks, they're too afraid to feel. But I'm 12, he said, and I wasn't afraid." She reached over and gently placed her hand over his. "Then you're already more of a man than most." Outside, an engine idled. She stood and opened the door. A clinic van waited at the curb. The driver stepped out, expression serious but kind. As the woman helped Caleb lift Lena, she looked him in the eye and said, "You didn't fail her, Caleb. You walked through fire to get her here." He swallowed hard, nodded. Before he climbed into the van, he turned to her one last time. "Why'd you help me?" She smiled. "Because someone once didn't, and I promised I'd never do the same." Then the door shut, and the van pulled away, leaving behind a boy's footprints on hot cement. Small, bare, and burning with love. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and old paint. A nurse behind the glass spoke into her headset while scribbling something with a chewed-up pen. The lobby was full, sick toddlers clinging to tired parents, an old man coughing quietly in the corner, a woman pressing a cold pack to her cheek with shaking hands. No one noticed the boy at first. Caleb stood just inside the sliding glass doors, his arms wrapped tightly around Lena. Her head rested against his chest, her face flushed with fever and faint. His shirt clung to him with sweat and dust, and his feet, red, cracked, blistered, barely held him upright. He approached the counter. The nurse looked up briefly. I need help," Caleb said. His voice sounded like it came from the bottom of a well. The nurse frowned. "Where are your parents?" "She's 3, he whispered. "She hit her head. She's not really waking up." "I asked about your parents. I don't know where my mum is. Please, she needs a doctor. Now." The nurse's eyes lingered on Lena for a moment, on the small, limp body, on the bruise near her temple, but her voice didn't soften. "We need an adult, guardian, someone to sign the forms, insurance information. Without that, She's dying!" Caleb shouted. The waiting room fell still. The old man coughed once more, then quieted. Even the receptionist's pen stopped moving. "She's burning up," Caleb added, softer now. "She can't talk. She won't even cry." The nurse hesitated. Her mouth moved, uncertain. And then a voice, measured, calm, unmistakably commanding, rose from behind them. "Help her!" All eyes turned. A tall man stood near the entrance, framed by the glare of sunlight outside. He wore a charcoal grey suit and a quiet authority. His tie was loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder, as if he hadn't meant to stop here. But something made him. Nathaniel Rhodes. Most people knew him by name, a few by face. The man who built half the shelters in the state. The billionaire who never granted interviews. A widower with a mansion, but no family. A man who kept to himself until he didn't. Now, he stepped forward, his eyes locked on the child in Caleb's arms. "She doesn't need a form," he said. "She needs help. Now." The nurse blinked. "Sir, I'll pay," he said simply. "Bill me for everything. Just take her, please." 2 words, the first time his voice cracked. The nurse rose without another word and disappeared through a swinging door. A moment later, a team emerged. A stretcher, gloves, quiet urgency. One of them reached for Lena. "No," Caleb whispered, tightening his grip. A nurse knelt before him. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can walk right next to her." "I don't want her to be alone," he said. Nathaniel moved beside him, crouched to his level. He didn't touch him. He didn't speak at first. Just waited for Caleb to meet his eyes. "You carried her all this way?" Nathaniel asked softly. Caleb nodded. "She wasn't supposed to fall," he said. "He pushed her, and I didn't stop him." "You protected her," Nathaniel said. "You brought her here. That's the only thing that matters now." "I don't have anyone else." "You do now." The stretcher moved. Caleb followed, one hand on the rail. Nathaniel watched until the doors closed, then turned back to the counter. "I want her in the best room you have," he said. "No delays. No questions." The nurse nodded, stunned. "Yes, sir." He turned to sit, then paused, noticing something on the floor. A single pink sock. Tiny. Inside out. Dirtied from the road. He bent slowly and picked it up, smoothing the fabric between his fingers like it was something holy. He held onto it. An hour passed. Caleb sat in a cold room with soft lights and a vending machine that ate his last dollar. Nathaniel waited beside him, reading nothing, saying nothing unless spoken to. At one point, Caleb whispered. "She likes strawberry cereal, the one with the marshmallows." Nathaniel nodded. "And she hates loud noises?" "She cries when someone slams a door." "I'll remember that." They sat in silence again. Then Caleb said, so quietly he nearly swallowed the words, "He told me if I said anything, they'd take her away, that we'd be separated." Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He took a breath, then leaned forward. "My father used to say something similar to me, that no one would believe a kid, that I should be grateful he hadn't left." Caleb looked up, startled. "He hit you?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Not where it showed. They were quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. Not heavy, not empty, shared. A doctor came in. She spoke in gentle tones. Concussion, dehydration, minor skull trauma. But Lena would be okay. She'd need rest, monitoring, time. She asked for her brother, the doctor added with a smile. Caleb broke into silent tears. Nathaniel stood, quietly slipping a tissue into his hand. Later, they stood beside Lena's bed. She looked so small under the sheets, IV taped to her hand, curls damp and messy. Caleb sat beside her, his fingers stroking hers. "She's going to be okay?" he asked. Nathaniel nodded. "She's strong, like her brother." Caleb whispered, "Thank you for not walking away." Nathaniel didn't respond for a moment. He stared at Lena, something unreadable in his eyes. "I almost did," he admitted. "I came here for a different reason, a meeting I didn't want to attend. I was going to cancel, turn around. Then I saw you." "Why did you stop?" Nathaniel's voice lowered. "Because I know what it looks like when someone is breaking and no one steps in." Caleb looked at him wide-eyed. "I won't let him near her again," the boy said fiercely. "You won't have to." Nathaniel stood straighter. "Tell me everything, the truth, no matter how ugly. I'll take care of it." Caleb hesitated. Then he began to talk. Everything, from the bruises to the threats, to the quiet fear that never left their kitchen, to the moment Lena fell and didn't cry. Nathaniel didn't interrupt once. When Caleb finished, his voice hoarse and spent, Nathaniel said only this: "You were never meant to carry this alone." And for the first time, in a long time, Caleb let someone else hold the weight, even just a little. The hallway outside Lena's recovery room was painted a dull beige, the kind of color that doesn't offend, but also doesn't comfort. Caleb sat slouched on a chair too big for him, his legs swinging above the floor, the fabric of his jeans stiff with sweat and dust. Across from him, Nathaniel Rhodes leaned forward in a padded chair, elbows on his knees, watching the boy with a patience that felt earned. Neither had said much in the last 10 minutes. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was like the hush that comes after a storm, when you're not sure if it's over yet. But the wind has finally stopped, rattling the windows. Caleb turned his head toward the window at the end of the corridor. He could see a sliver of sky, softening into dusk. "She always says the sky is pink when angels brush their hair," he murmured. Nathaniel looked over. "She sounds like a poet." "She's just 3, Caleb shrugged. "But sometimes she says things that sound like music." Nathaniel smiled faintly, then looked down at his hands. He was holding the sock again, the one that had fallen off Lena's foot during the walk. He hadn't meant to keep it, but he hadn't let it go either. "I didn't think anyone would help us," Caleb said after a moment, his voice small. "Why's that?" Nathaniel asked gently. The boy shrugged again, but his throat tightened. "People don't. They look. They pass. They turn." Nathaniel didn't rush to fill the space. Caleb looked at him then, really looked. "Why didn't you?" The question hung there like steam rising from asphalt. He had every right to ask it. Nathaniel took a slow breath, choosing his words with care. Because I saw myself in you. A long time ago, I was the one standing alone, holding too much, and no one turned toward me. Caleb frowned. What happened? Nathaniel paused, then answered, Someone should have stepped in. But they didn't. And for a long time, I believed that meant I didn't matter. The boy studied him. You're rich. You got everything. I have things, Nathaniel corrected gently. But things aren't the same as peace, or presence, or safety. There was a quiet. Then Caleb asked, Did you ever get better? Nathaniel met his gaze. Only when I stopped pretending, I didn't need other people. The door to Lena's room opened slightly, and a nurse stepped out. She's sleeping, she whispered. You can sit with her now if you'd like. Caleb stood, already moving. I'll be right here, Nathaniel said. Inside the room, Lena was curled under a pale blue blanket, one arm resting above her head. The machines beeped softly. Caleb climbed into the chair beside her, reached for her tiny hand, and wrapped his fingers around it. She didn't wake, but her fingers twitched. He smiled through tears. I told you we'd make it, he whispered. He sat with her for nearly an hour, watching her chest rise and fall. At one point, he hummed the song their mother used to sing when folding laundry, off-key, quiet, but full of memory. When he stepped back into the hallway, Nathaniel stood. You ready? Where are we going? My car's downstairs. I figured we could stop somewhere and get you cleaned up, a proper meal. If that's all right. Caleb hesitated. I don't want to leave her. She'll be here all night. Monitored. Safe. The boy looked torn. Then he nodded, slowly. Nathaniel led him to a sleek black sedan parked near the emergency entrance. It felt like stepping into a different world. The leather seats, the soft jazz playing from the speakers, the quiet hum of comfort. Caleb sank into the back seat, blinking at the ceiling. This car smells like oranges. Cedar and citrus, Nathaniel said. Reminds me of my grandmother's kitchen. She used to keep orange peels on the windowsill. That's weird, Caleb said, but he smiled. I think I would have liked her. She would have liked you, Nathaniel replied. They drove in companionable silence. When they reached the guest house Nathaniel had arranged, modest but warm, with a porch swing and 2 small rooms, Caleb stared at it, like it might disappear. I get to stay here, he asked. For now, until we figure out what's next. Nathaniel didn't mention the lawyer he'd already called, the caseworker he'd left 3 voicemails for, or the quiet vow he'd made to never let Dale anywhere near the boy again. Inside, Caleb took a shower. The steam fogged the mirror, and he stood under the hot water longer than he meant to. When he came out, there were fresh clothes laid on the bed, a soft t-shirt, sweatpants, even socks. He changed slowly. In the kitchen, Nathaniel stirred something on the stove. I don't really eat much, Caleb said, peeking in. Good, Nathaniel replied. This won't be much, just soup and toast. Caleb sat at the table, the wood warm under his fingers. He didn't speak while they ate, but halfway through he said, Most grown-ups say they'll be there, and then they're not. Nathaniel nodded. I know. You're the second one who didn't turn away. Who was the first? Caleb thought for a long moment. A woman outside a church. She gave me $20 and an ice pack. Told me I didn't have to carry her alone. Nathaniel's eyes softened. You didn't. I thought I did. I know that feeling, he said. Like if you don't hold it all, no one else will. Yeah, Caleb whispered. After dinner, Nathaniel offered the couch, but Caleb chose the rug in Lena's empty room. He spread the blanket thin and laid down with his back to the door. Before Nathaniel turned off the light, he asked, "Can I leave the hallway light on?" Of course. The light stayed on all night, and Caleb slept. For the first time in weeks, no nightmares, no shouting through thin walls, just the hum of a quiet house, a hallway light, and the knowledge that someone had stayed, not for show, not for pity, but because they chose to. In the stillness, that choice became a promise. The second grown-up in his life who hadn't looked away might be the first one to stay. The hospital lights had that soft, milky glow that made everything seem less urgent than it was. But Caleb knew urgency. He'd lived with it, under its roof, beside its breath. Lena was asleep again, her cheeks pale but peaceful. A nurse had drawn a teddy bear on her monitor printout. She'd called Lena a little warrior, and Caleb had almost cried at how gently she said it. But outside her room, the real world hadn't softened. It was still sharp-edged, filled with adults who needed forms and proof and voices, louder than a 12-year-old boy could give. Nathaniel stood beside a nurse's station, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and measured. "Yes, I'm aware of the custody protocol. No, I'm not family, not legally. But he is in danger. They both are. I have a lawyer on the case already." Caleb watched him, this tall, quiet man who hadn't flinched once since they met. He hadn't asked for a backstory. He hadn't said, "Are you sure that's what happened?" Instead, he'd said, "Tell me everything," and meant it. But now, even with a lawyer, even with bills paid in full, there was something missing. Something Caleb didn't know how to name. Evidence. The next morning, Caleb sat at the small table near Lena's bed. She was awake now, eating yogurt slowly, still weak, still not speaking much. She handed him a piece of paper, crumpled and torn at the edges. On it, a drawing. 4 stick figures. 2 large ones, one holding a bottle in its hand, scowling. A smaller one, with curly hair lying beside something sharp and jagged. Maybe a table. And one more figure, a boy, with tears coming from 2 dots. Caleb stared. He knew exactly what it was. "Bug," he whispered. She pointed to the paper and then to the 4 in her hand. "He did this?" she said. Only 3 words, but they burned into the air like smoke from a flare. Nathaniel walked in just then, holding a coffee. "Morning," he greeted gently, then paused when he saw the drawing. Caleb held it out. She just said, "He did this." Nathaniel took the paper carefully, his fingers brushing Caleb's. "No one in that house is going to believe me," Caleb said. "They'll say I'm making it up, or protecting her." Nathaniel sat down. "What if we don't ask them to believe you?" Caleb looked confused. "I've asked a private investigator to go by your building today," Nathaniel said. "Some neighbors might talk, but more importantly," he paused, "some houses in that development, yours included, were fitted with smart doorbells last year. Motion sensors, video archives." Caleb's eyes widened. "You think it saw—" "I think it might have," Nathaniel said. "And if not that one, maybe another neighbor's. Sometimes the truth lives in the things no one notices." Caleb gripped the edge of the table. "If we had a video—" "We'll find out," Nathaniel said. Then, softer, "You've already told the truth. It's time someone helped you prove it." That afternoon, while Lena rested and Caleb dozed beside her with one arm over her tiny frame, Nathaniel stepped outside to meet the investigator, a gruff, middle-aged woman named Carol, who had the kind of walk that said, "Get out of my way," without needing to say anything at all. She handed him a USB drive. "This is from the unit across the courtyard. Picked up motion and audio from your boy's window on the day in question. Footage is clean. No tampering. And Carol looked him square in the face. It's bad, but it's enough. She hesitated, then added, he's lucky he ran when he did. Nathaniel nodded, but his face stayed still. The kind of still that comes from years of learning how to hide reactions. But inside, something surged, fury, relief, and something heavier than both. Grief. Grief that it had to come to this, that a child had to bleed to be believed. He took the drive and turned to go back in. Carol stopped him. That kid, she said, her voice softer. I've seen a lot of things, but the way he carried her, on that footage, he kept saying, stay awake, Bug, we're almost there, stay with me. Over and over. Nathaniel nodded. Once. I know. Back in the hospital room, Nathaniel waited until Caleb was awake and Lena was softly coloring in a butterfly sticker book. Then he handed the boy the USB drive. We have it, he said. It shows what happened. Caleb's mouth fell open slightly. You saw it? Nathaniel nodded. The whole world will if you want them to. Caleb stared at the tiny plastic rectangle like it was a lifeline. Then he whispered, will it stop him? It'll start the process, Nathaniel said. Police, court, restraining orders, protective custody. Your story is no longer just words. I'm not scared of him anymore, Caleb said, but I'm scared they won't care. Nathaniel crouched down beside him. I care. That's one. The lawyer cares. That's two. And when we show them this, your truth, her drawing, that tape, others will care too. Caleb didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, do you think Mom knew? Nathaniel blinked. Knew what? How bad it was. With Dale, Nathaniel considered. I think maybe she was drowning too. Some people can't call for help when they're under the water. Caleb nodded slowly. Then, what happens now? Nathaniel looked at Lena. Now, we let her rest. We let the lawyer work. And we wait. But you won't wait alone. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. That night, after Lena was tucked into the hospital bed, Caleb sat on the small window bench, looking out at the streetlights. Nathaniel joined him, quietly. Caleb said, I used to think the only way to be safe was to be small. Quiet, not noticed. And now, Nathaniel asked, I think being noticed by the right person is what saves you. They sat in silence again. The kind of silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Then Nathaniel pulled something from his pocket, the drawing. He'd flattened it out, placed it in a plastic sleeve. I'm going to frame this, he said. Caleb raised a brow. Why? Because it's truth, and truth is worth protecting. Caleb nodded, his throat full. And far below, in the darkened city, Dale Whitman was being escorted from his apartment in handcuffs. The truth had found its way home, not with screams, but with the room smelled faintly of old paper and lemon cleaner, like too many confessions had been wiped off the walls. Caleb sat at the center of a long wooden table, his feet not quite touching the floor. His hands were folded in his lap, not from nervousness, but from muscle memory. He had learned long ago to keep still, to not take up too much space when grown-ups were talking. But today, he had something to say. Next to him sat Nathaniel Rhodes, calm and quiet, a notebook unopened before him. Across the table, the child protective investigator, Ms. Garvey, offered a glass of water that Caleb didn't touch. A lawyer for the county sat in the corner. A recorder blinked red. Everything was quiet, like before a storm. Can you tell us again, in your own words? Miss Garvey's voice was gentle. No rush. Caleb looked down at the table. His voice was small but steady. He told me if I said anything, they'd take her away. Lena. He said they'd split us up, that they always do that to kids like us. Who told you that? Dale, Caleb said. He's my mum's boyfriend. I don't know if they're still together. Nathaniel placed one hand lightly on the table, close, but not touching. Just a presence. Caleb looked up. He pushed her. Lena. She hit the table. Her head. And what happened next? I told him to call someone. He laughed, said she'd wake up, that I should toughen up and stop whining like a girl. Caleb paused. But she wasn't waking up. Her face didn't move. Miss Garvey was scribbling notes. I wrapped her in the duck blanket. It's the softest one. And I walked. He glanced over at Nathaniel. Until he found me. The lawyer cleared his throat. And before that day, was this the first time Mr. Dale physically hurt your sister? No, Caleb said quietly. He'd grab her arm hard, scream at her. Once, he locked her in the bathroom for an hour because she spilled juice. I tried to get her out. He slapped me. There was silence. And your mother? The lawyer asked. Where was she during these times? Caleb hesitated. She was tired. Always tired. Sometimes crying. Sometimes gone. The door clicked open softly. Everyone turned, and there she was. Stephanie. She hadn't knocked. She looked thinner than before, hair unbrushed, makeup from 2 days ago clinging under her eyes like ghost paint. She stood in the doorway, frozen. I was told I could come, she said. Miss Garvey nodded. You're listed. Please take a seat. Stephanie sat in the corner, not next to Caleb, not across, just barely inside the room, as if guilt had a radius. She wrung her hands, looked at her son, looked away. You can speak if you like, Miss Monroe, said the lawyer. I didn't know, she whispered. No one spoke. I thought he was helping us, paying rent, watching them when I worked nights. I was so tired all the time, Her voice cracked. I told myself Caleb was exaggerating, that he was trying to make me leave Dale like I left his father. Caleb didn't flinch, but his eyes dulled, like lights dimmed behind curtains. Nathaniel finally spoke. You didn't believe your son when he said he was afraid? Stephanie swallowed. No, she said. I thought he was angry I was dating again, that he just wanted me to himself. I never wanted that, Caleb said, barely a whisper. I know, she murmured. Another silence. Then Caleb reached into the backpack beside him and pulled out a piece of paper, folded 3 times, creased at the edges, childish scrawls. He slid it across the table. What's this? Miss Garvey asked. It's from Lena, Caleb said. She drew it at the hospital. The nurse gave her crayons. They all leaned forward. A crayon drawing. A stick figure with a ponytail and purple dress lying beside a brown rectangle, obviously meant to be a table. A tall red figure beside her with angry eyebrows. And another smaller blue one, holding something like a blanket. And beside them, written phonetically, the words, Caleb took me away. Stephanie choked. That's what she remembers, Caleb said. She doesn't have all the words, but she remembers. The room felt like a held breath. I didn't think she saw, he added. But she did. Stephanie stood. Not in anger, more like collapse. She walked to the table, eyes red, and placed a trembling hand on the drawing. She looked at her son. I failed you, she said. Caleb didn't say anything. I let a man treat you like noise, and I told myself you were just dramatic. But you weren't. You were protecting her. And me. Still no answer. She let her tears fall then. Quiet. Without sobbing. Just salt and surrender. I don't deserve either of you, she whispered. But if you'll let me, I want to try again. Even if all you let me do is sit in the waiting room while she sleeps. Even if all I ever get is one more drawing. Caleb's lips trembled. She asks for you sometimes, he said. Stephanie blinked. She does? She thinks you're working late. I didn't tell her you left. Stephanie sank into the nearest chair, burying her face in her hands. I wanted to come back, she said, but I didn't know how to face what I'd ignored, and I was scared they'd take you both away if I showed up too late. Nathaniel cleared his throat. You're here now, he said, but you're not the one who decides what's enough. He is. He looked at Caleb, and for the first time, Caleb turned fully toward his mother. I don't trust Easy anymore, he said. Stephanie nodded, lips pressed tightly. But I remember when you used to sing to us. That Sweet Baby James song. She looked up, startled. That's the mom I still miss, he said, the one with the dish towel over her shoulder and burnt spaghetti sauce on the stove. Her lips trembled. If she comes back, Caleb whispered, maybe we can draw her a picture too. Stephanie covered her mouth with one hand. Miss Garvey stood. That's enough for today. She turned off the recorder. And just like that, the boy who had walked through heat and fear to save his sister made space for one more seat at the table. Not a clean slate, but maybe a corner of the paper, blank, waiting, ready to be drawn on. The courtroom wasn't grand, no stained glass windows, no sweeping ceilings, just linoleum floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and a wooden seal mounted crooked on the wall behind the judge. But for Caleb, it felt as big as the world. He sat on the wooden bench beside Nathaniel, his shoes barely brushing the floor. His hands were folded, back straight, heart pounding. Dale sat across the room in a dark grey suit too tight around the neck, his jaw clenched in that way Caleb remembered all too well. It wasn't anger, it was ownership. That cold, quiet confidence Dale wore when he thought no one could touch him. But today was different. Stephanie sat in the second row behind Caleb. Her hands were shaking in her lap. She hadn't spoken much on the ride over, just stared out the window, lips pressed tight, as if holding in a tide. The judge, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a firm voice, called the hearing to order. It wasn't a criminal trial. Not yet. This was family court, a place where custody, guardianship, and truths were sorted like broken puzzle pieces. Mr. Rhodes, the judge said, looking toward Nathaniel. You're the guardian ad litem, correct? I am, Your Honor, he replied calmly. And you've been caring for both children. Yes. And you wish to retain temporary custody while this matter is investigated. I do, he said, then added, because it's safer that way. The judge nodded, flipping through the file before her. Then she looked to Caleb. Would you be willing to speak today? Caleb nodded once. You understand what it means to speak the truth here? I do, he said quietly. Even if it's hard. They called him forward. He stepped up to the witness seat, hands gripping the wooden sides, legs dangling. State your name, the judge instructed. Caleb Monroe. And your age? 12. The room was so quiet, Caleb could hear the pen scratching against the clerk's notepad. Tell us what happened, Caleb, in your own words. He took a breath. He hurt her. Lena. He always yelled, but this time he shoved her. She hit her head. She didn't cry. She just stopped moving. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. I told him we had to call someone. He said no, that she'd be fine, that I was being weak, that nobody would believe me anyway. Who said this? The judge asked gently. Dale. The man shifted in his seat. And then, what did you do? I carried her, all the way to the clinic. You carried your 3-year-old sister, barefoot, Across several blocks to the hospital. Yes, he looked down, hands trembling now. Because I was the only one who would. The judge paused, her expression unreadable. The opposing lawyer rose. Caleb, did Dale ever say anything about what would happen if you spoke out? Yes, Caleb replied. He said they'd take us away, put us in homes, split us up. And did that scare you? Caleb looked at him. It still does. Silence. Then Dale stood, unprompted. This is ridiculous, he snapped. A 12-year-old kid gets to decide what's true. The kid's always had an issue with me. He's jealous, possessive of his mother. He wanted me out from day one. Mr. Dale, the judge warned, he's making up fairy tales. Look at me. Do I look like someone who'd hurt a child? Stephanie stood suddenly. Your Honor, she said, voice wavering. May I speak? The judge hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead, Ms. Monroe. Stephanie stepped forward. I used to think Caleb was exaggerating, that he just didn't like Dale. I let my exhaustion cloud my judgment, but I saw the bruises, I heard the yelling, and I chose to look away. Her voice cracked. My daughter could have died. She turned to Dale, her eyes hard. And you didn't flinch. Dale scoffed. You're weak, Stephanie. You always needed someone to blame. No, she said, voice rising for the first time. I needed someone to protect us, and you made my son do it. Stephanie turned back to the judge. Please, let them stay with Mr. Rhodes. He's the only adult who didn't turn away. Dale's lawyer whispered something to him, but Dale waved him off. I took care of them, he barked. I put food on the table when she was working doubles, and what thanks do I get? Lies and drawings. Drawings? The judge asked, eyebrow raised. Nathaniel stood, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. This was drawn by Lena at the hospital, he said. It clearly depicts the event, her injury, Caleb wrapping her in a blanket and leaving. It may not be a sworn testimony, but it is a record, and children often tell the truth with color before they ever find words. He passed it forward. The judge examined it in silence. After a long pause, she leaned forward. I've read the medical reports, the photos, the counselor's assessment, and now I've heard from the boy himself. Mr. Dale, you will have no contact with these children until further notice. Any attempt will result in criminal charges. Dale opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The judge continued, her tone softer. Mr. Rhodes, thank you for stepping forward. Temporary custody will remain with you, pending full review. Nathaniel nodded once. Thank you, Your Honor. Caleb sat still, staring down at the edge of the table, trying to breathe. As they filed out of the courtroom, reporters didn't follow. There were no headlines, but something sacred had shifted. Outside, the sunlight had changed, gentler, golden, as if the sky had exhaled. Stephanie stood next to Caleb, unsure. Can I walk with you? She asked. He nodded. They walked side by side, not touching, not rushing. After a block, she asked, why did you speak up, even when you were scared? Caleb looked ahead. Because sometimes the smallest voices are the only ones that tell the truth. Nathaniel followed behind, letting them have the sidewalk. And above them, the courthouse stood small, ordinary. But inside it that day, a boy lit a match against the dark. The courthouse doors shut with a hiss behind them. Outside, the afternoon sun draped everything in amber, the trees, the sidewalk, even the silence between mother and son. Stephanie walked 2 steps behind Caleb, as if uncertain whether she was allowed to walk beside him. Nathaniel kept a respectful distance, knowing this part of the road was not his to lead. Caleb didn't speak. Not yet. He stared straight ahead, A boy who had grown too old in too little time. His hands were in the pockets of a jacket Nathaniel had given him, one size too big, but warm. "Can we stop for ice cream?" Lena asked suddenly from her stroller. Her voice, soft, hopeful, cracked something open. Caleb glanced back. "You feel okay?" She nodded. "The pink kind." With sprinkles, Stephanie looked at Caleb, waiting. It wasn't her decision anymore. He hesitated, then nodded once. The shop was quiet, just the hum of the freezer and a soft jazz record playing in the corner. They sat at a round table by the window. Lena kicked her feet as she scooped pink ice cream into her mouth with clumsy joy. A sticky dot of cream clung to her nose. Caleb didn't eat. He watched her. He always watched her. Stephanie sat across from him, spoon idle in her cup. "I used to bring you here," she said, "when you were 5. You spilled chocolate syrup on everything." Caleb didn't answer. "I would wipe your hands with napkins and laugh. I don't know why I remember that now." He looked at her. "Because that was before." Her eyes welled up. "I know I don't deserve to come back. Not like this. But I want you to know I'm staying. I signed the agreement. Dale won't be near us again. Ever." Caleb blinked slowly. "Will you go to those meetings?" he asked. "The therapy ones?" "I will." "Even when it's hard?" Stephanie nodded. "Even then." Caleb looked down at his untouched cone. "That's the only way I'll believe you." She nodded again. "Fair." Then quietly, almost in passing, he said, "You could have left him sooner." The sentence was simple, but it carried years. "I know," she said. Silence. Then Lena, oblivious to the undercurrent, announced, "I drawed us." She held up a napkin scribbled with crayon from her pocket. 3 stick figures, one tall with brown hair, one small with curls, and a medium-sized one with square shoulders. "That one's you," she said to Nathaniel. "You have the biggest arms. You hold the house up." He smiled, but it was Caleb who spoke next. "For as long as you need," he said. "It's yours too now." That night, back at the guest house, the kitchen light glowed warm. Nathaniel fried eggs, while Stephanie washed the dishes from lunch, sleeves rolled up. Caleb sat at the table, flipping through a comic book he didn't really read. Lena colored beside him, tongue poked in concentration. It wasn't perfect, but it was quiet, and nobody raised their voice. The official custody transfer came 3 days later. Nathaniel was granted temporary guardianship, with Stephanie allowed supervised visitation under Caleb's discretion. A social worker would check in weekly. There were signatures, stamped documents, words like stability, best interest, and trauma-informed care. To Caleb, it meant something simpler. There was a lock on the front door that worked. There was no shouting in the kitchen. There was space to exhale. One morning, Stephanie showed up holding a shoebox. She sat it on the kitchen table. "These are yours," she said, "from when you were little. I kept them." Caleb opened the box slowly. Inside were drawings, a crumpled birthday card, a paper crown from a fast food restaurant. "You used to call me Sir Caleb," she said, "made me bow before I could enter your blanket fort." Caleb smiled for the first time that day. It was small, tentative, but it stayed. Later, as Stephanie stepped outside, he followed. "Why did you bring those?" he asked. She looked at him, startled. "Because I wanted you to know. You were always loved, even when I didn't protect you like I should have." Caleb stared at the yard. "I used to wait at the window," he said, "at night, just in case you'd come back early." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know how lost I'd gotten until you stopped looking for me." The wind moved gently through the trees. "I'm still angry," he said. "I know. But I don't want to be forever." Stephanie swallowed hard. "Then maybe We just take it one drawing at a time." He nodded and walked back inside. 1 week later, the doorbell rang. Caleb opened it to find a small brown envelope on the mat. Inside, a photograph from the courtroom, him seated upright, brave, speaking truth. On the back, Nathaniel had written in neat cursive, "Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it walks quietly beside the smallest feet." There was no signature, just an address for a private scholarship foundation. Caleb placed the photo beside Lena's latest drawing on the fridge. Underneath, he taped one word, written in thick blue ink, "Safe." And in a home no longer haunted by shouting. In the hush of a kitchen filled with light and quiet strength. A boy who had carried more than his share finally set something down. Not bitterness, not blame, but a small part of hope. And it stayed. The sun filtered through lace curtains, warm and gentle, like a whisper against the wooden floor. It was the first Saturday of the month. Pancake Day, as Lena called it, and the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and something softly burning. Caleb stood at the stove, flipping imperfect pancakes, while Lena sat at the counter with her knees tucked under her chin, drawing. Her hair had grown out, soft curls now reaching her shoulders, no longer tangled, no longer pulled. Nathaniel walked in, holding the mail. He looked rested for once, like a man learning the art of staying. "Something came for you," he said, placing a white envelope on the table. Caleb wiped his hands and opened it. Inside was a folded flyer with a single sentence printed in large type, "Lena's Light, a foundation for silent children." Below was a picture of Lena from last spring, sitting in a field of wildflowers, holding a paintbrush, smiling with her eyes closed. "Is this real?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Nathaniel nodded. "It was approved yesterday. The paperwork's done. The funding's in place." Caleb ran a thumb over the edges of the flyer. "So, she gets to help other kids now." "She already has," Nathaniel said. "This just makes it official." Lena looked up. "Is that my name?" Caleb turned the flyer to her. "It's your name. Your light." She blinked. "I thought I didn't have light." "You always did," he said, "even when you were hiding it." She smiled, then reached into her little drawing book and tore out a page. Her, Caleb, and Nathaniel standing beneath a big sun. She handed it to Nathaniel. "That's yours." He folded it carefully, like it was something holy. Later that evening, they visited the community center that would house the Foundation's first art room. The building used to be a library. The shelves had been cleared out, the walls painted pale yellow. And in the center of the far wall, a mural had begun. Brush strokes of sky, trees, and a small child holding a lantern. Caleb traced the outline with his finger. "It doesn't look like her exactly," he said. "It's not supposed to," Nathaniel replied. "It's meant to look like every child who waited in the dark." Stephanie arrived just before sunset, holding a stack of storybooks for the reading corner. Her eyes softened when she saw Caleb helping Lena unpack crayons. "She sleeps better now," she said quietly to Nathaniel, "and he's softer around her. Like he finally believes she's staying." Nathaniel didn't answer. He just nodded. Stephanie walked over to her son. "I brought the blue quilt from Grandma's house, for the nap corner." Caleb paused. "She used to wrap us in that when the power went out." "I remember," she said. "It always smelled like lavender and wood smoke." Caleb didn't smile, but he took the quilt, carefully, like it was something worth forgiving her for. The evening grew long. The center emptied, light flickering off the new windows. Before they left, Lena ran back inside. She stood in front of the mural for a long time, then whispered something none of them could hear. When she turned around, There were tears on her cheeks, not frightened ones, soft ones, the kind that come when something unlatches inside and breathes. "What did you say to the painting?" Stephanie asked. Lena shrugged. "I said thank you for waiting." On the walk home, Nathaniel hung back again, giving them space. Caleb reached for Lena's hand. She took it. "You know," she said, "you're my favorite brother." "I'm your only brother," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's what makes it special." At the house, she fell asleep quickly, crayon in hand, drawing book beside her. Caleb stood in the hallway for a long while, watching her through the doorway. "Do you think she'll remember it?" he asked Nathaniel quietly. "Some of it," Nathaniel said, "but not all. Children are good at keeping what matters and letting the rest become smoke." Caleb nodded slowly. "She still flinches sometimes," he added. "So do you." A long pause. "But you're healing," Nathaniel continued. "Both of you?" "And you?" Caleb asked. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. "I think I am," he said, "because I'm not walking alone anymore." They stood in the hallway, two shadows side by side. No more cages, no more dark roads. Just the quiet hum of a house, learning how to hold people again. And on the fridge, beneath Lena's rainbow drawings and Caleb's court photo, a magnet now held a new piece of paper. It read, "Lena's light is not a place, it's a promise." And that promise, like the girl it was named for, did not flicker, did not fade. It stayed. Not every hero wears a cape. Some are 12, with tired eyes and a crumpled blanket. Some are 3, with a drawing clutched in one small hand. And some, like Nathaniel, like Stephanie, like the reader who made it this far, are simply people who choose, at some point, to stay. Lena's light isn't just a name, it's a reminder that even when the world fails you, love can come back. That silence isn't always the end of a story. It can be the breath before someone finally speaks up. That no matter how deep the hurt, healing begins with one person willing to say, "I believe you." In a world where it's easy to turn away, this story dares to look closer, to remind us that what we choose to notice can save a life. Or two. Or many. So if you're reading this today, ask yourself, who might need your quiet presence, your listening ear, your second chance? And more importantly, how are you doing? Are you sleeping enough, eating something warm, letting someone in just a little? Because sometimes the person you're most meant to rescue is yourself. Take care of your heart today. You matter more than you know. And somewhere, someone like Caleb or Lena is hoping there are more people in the world like you. Be that light and let it stay.